Hi, my name's Keith Cooper of Northlight Images, and in this video I'm going to have a look at some of what the differences are for me between the screen, the print, the actual view, and the reality of what the scene was when I was there, if you want to call it that. Somebody recently asked me about how I viewed images on the screen compared with images as prints. Now, there are four real areas of this. There's the technical side of it. Now I'll go through some of the technical differences that help if you want to make prints. These are not things you need to know, but they're just little bits that I feel do help understanding them. Secondly, there's the process. There's the actual process of making a print, and I'll go through some aspects of that. Thirdly, there's the actual viewing of prints and how prints, the way you view them is different to screens and things like that, and why that makes a difference and how that affects the end view of how you see a print as to how you see an image on screen. Now, I am happy to accept that many people will have other interpretations of this, but I get asked a lot about some of my photos. This is one that I've brought up from downstairs. It's one that I like. It's a scene in Colorado. It's just catching the colours of the first flush of the sagebrush in here, and there's some cottonwood trees which are just starting to show a little touch of green on them. It's probably in April time in Colorado. It's the Great Sand Dunes National Monument is in the distance here. I was driving down near there, but this isn't actually anywhere for the national park now, isn't it? Yeah, I can't remember. It wasn't a national park the first time I ever went. But anyway, that's the print that I'm looking at. What about the technology? Screen v print. First of all, the obvious difference is this screen, and this is the image. This is, I don't necessarily know if this is the version that this was printed from, but it's obviously the same image. The screen emits light. The print reflects light. Now, I've had to be a bit more careful than with my usual lighting setup when I record these videos to try and reduce the amount of reflections and things off this, because this does have glass on front of it. That's from a practical point of view as much as anything. It is actually printed, this one, on a luster paper, if I remember rightly, although I would have to get it out of the screen from where I'm looking at it here. It's certainly not a glossy print. I have printed this one on art papers as well. It depends on the look you want, but I come back to the look and paper choices in a bit. So as I say, the screen is not the print. Well, it's patently obvious in that respect. Light's coming out of this, light's being reflected off that. So you need to allow for that. But more importantly, and the bit that people don't get particularly, and this is where differences in paper makes a difference, is the tonal range of this print here is much less than the tonal range I've got on the monitor here. Now, I've set the lighting up in here, I've set the recording, because this is being done for a video, I've set it up so that both should look reasonably similar, and they do. And if you set up your viewing lighting and you set up your screen, you should get a reasonable comparison between the screen and print. However, because the range, the gamut, the range of colours is different on this to what it is to this. They're quite different. You need to allow for that when you're doing this. Now, some people like soft proofing. I use it occasionally. I won't use it for every single image because I find it discourages me from actually thinking about what the print is going to look like. It's a useful tool. It's a useful thing to get started with, but I prefer to have printed test images and things like that. I look at one of my test images as a print. I look at it on the screen, and that reinforces the fact that this print here, the test print, is not the screen. I don't want to be able to get something perfect on screen and then just go print and expect that duplicated, because it won't be duplicated, because as I said right at the start, they're not the same thing. So they're not the same thing. You can't get a perfect duplication for it. And so when people say, I've got a problem with my printing because my prints don't look like my screen, I go, yeah, so what? That's to be expected. Now, they look completely different. You're probably doing something wrong on the way, but it's a fixable thing. But what needs more fixing in some is that assumption that the screen and the print are essentially the same thing. They're not. And that's where it makes an important difference to me looking at prints. Now, I've mentioned soft proofing. Great way of doing it. Sometimes the best image to be printed is not the best looking image on the screen. An example of that would be sunsets sometime, where you want to crank up the colours to give the right feel for the image without overdoing it. Now, it's really easy to overdo it on a screen because screens excel at bright colours. Prints less so. Because of the nature of pigment and dye inks on paper. They're not the same. So you've got different capabilities there. Sometimes if I want to print something and it is a particularly strong set of colours, I will get something right on screen. This is where soft proofing can come in. It can hint to me where I'm going to lose some of those strong colours. I may then do a test print using a profile, obviously. And looking at that test print, I can see, does it have the right range of colours that I'm after? Does it give the right impression? I'm not bothered about the strict gamut of the printer, the ink set, the paper and things like that. I'm looking at the level of, can I get an image which matches what I feel it should look like? And this is where a lot of your choices about making prints come in. Can you get it to look like you feel it ought to look like? And of course, you have to be able to do that, you have to have an endpoint, an objective in mind. You need to know where you're going with a print. Now, I've made prints and they've not worked, but looking at the print that hasn't worked, not always this size, obviously. Well, not unless I'm testing a printer and I've got free paper and ink. But in looking at a print, I can think, does this work? Does it have the right feel for it that I was after? It may look great on screen, but it just doesn't quite work. And typically that comes down to the brightness, it comes down to the colour gamut, and it's the contrast, the tonal range. The tonal range on this. Now, you won't be able to see it on video very clearly because there's a limited tonal range on the video, and I've lit this to try and make these look very similar, and they do look quite similar. It's one of the reasons I've set up the lighting the way it is. It just makes it easier for me to show things on videos. But when I'm doing all of this, I need to think about, as I say, about paper choices and all kinds of bits and pieces like that. But when it comes down to it, I'm making a print. So that's almost the mechanics of it, of why prints look different. Now, you need to, as I said, take care with your viewing lighting. If you're going to put a print up in a room somewhere, it needs to be adequately lit. A print which is not very well lit doesn't really give its best at all, because the low lighting levels, or reflections if that's a problem, but low lighting levels in particular, even further reduce the tonal range on it, and you're already pushing things going from this to this. Now, if you're producing images and you want them to look like a screen, then get yourself some backlit film and a light box and produce your pictures to go on a light box. They will look much more like a screen. It won't look quite the same, but they will look more like a screen. But that's an awful lot of trouble to go to when you can have a print. Now, I've got this print here. What am I looking at this print? Why is this print not the same? In a way, this is ephemeral. This print is an end point. It's the point in my process where I've gone, this is done. I'm happy with what this looks like. This is finished. Now, years ago, I used to do oil painting and stuff. And I grew up on the Suffolk coast, and that's where my interest in skies come from. I've not done any painting for many a year, but it still inspires some of my photography, some aspects. This aspect of my photography goes back a long way, and this helped inspire my architectural photography, which is what I do for paid work. I don't sell prints very often. I don't do that. There's just not that much of a market for it. So I do commercial industrial photography for my job, as it were. But this goes back further than that. And this is about a finished statement. Is it a work? Well, if you want to call it that, or even calling it a statement seems a bit posh really, but in a way, that's the finished point. Now, why is that important? Well, one of the things is, if looking at stuff on a screen, it's great. I can flick through images. I've got galleries I look through on a screen if I want to see something. I've got some, some blog articles, which are lists of photographs and scenes when I've travelled around sometimes. Yeah, great. Those are ephemeral. This print, by dint of it being on the wall downstairs, same as the prints that I've got on the wall behind me here. This print will be there tomorrow morning when I get up. This print will be there when I come in, I've been out at work. This one will sit there on the wall. Does it mean something different to me depending on how I feel? Yes, very much. And that's the whole point of doing a print. You have to think, who are you doing it for? Now, if you're selling prints, you have to do a little bit more, because producing prints that you like and nobody else likes, well, that's fine if you're going to do them. But if you want to sell prints, there's a lot more. You need to understand your market. But I've done lots of stuff about the business side of photography and why your prints sell or don't sell and things like that. But this is nothing to do with that. This is about a personal work. This is an image that represents a time. It represents a particular date. The stormy skies, they represent what it was like that day, but they give a sense of change. This was taken, if I remember rightly, on the first time I went away on my own, just for the hell of it, to drive around bits of the States for a month or so. So there are lots of other bits which you can have no way of knowing. So I hope that when people look at this image, certainly if anyone knows the area, this bit of Colorado, if you know the area, it should have a certain resonance for you. But in a way, that doesn't matter, because this is on the wall in my house, in my room. Fortunately, Karen likes it as well, so it passes the approval. It gets listed for inclusion in the house collection. These pictures do get rotated, move other ones. I frame them up. I've got a load of these frames. I've covered some aspects of framing them like this. But big pictures like this, I want to see them like this. I don't want them done like that. In a way, that it's like the difference between watching a movie on a decent sized television and on a phone. There is no comparison. Certainly if your eyesight's like mine, there's no comparison, because I have to hold the phone that far away to see any detail on it. But that's it still comes down to, here's the final print. I mentioned at the start about the actual view of the reality. I could go back to this scene. I know where this is. I know where this was taken. This picture, by the way, it was starting to rain. I was driving along a deserted, dead straight road, and I looked out and saw the view, saw the storm front. And this was taken quite a long, a 70 to 200 lens, so a longer lens. And I looked out, took a shot. Yeah, it was interesting. Then I noticed these trees just a few hundred yards down the road. So I drove along with the window open, looking out, and lined the car up with these trees and this storm front. I took a few photos around. This was the one I liked best in terms of the clouds and everything like that. But the staging, literally, I did not get out of the car here because it was raining. This is taken through the passenger window. And no, sorry, I'm in America, so it was taken through my window. Hence, that side, whatever. So that's it. So there's a bit of artifice in it, in that I've actually decided, yes, I like this view. Well, how can I make it a bit more interesting? I've driven down and I've shoved these trees in the view. Does that detract? No, I know that. You know that now. Does it make any difference to it? No, really. It just meant that I was thinking about the shop as a print at the time. But I said sometimes views don't work. The best example, I mentioned the other day when I was looking at some shots of the North Sea. I've got lots of pictures taken of the North Sea in there. And they sometimes don't work. Sometimes they don't capture the emotion. Sometimes the light that you see there doesn't translate well to a print. Sometimes there's not enough contrast in real light. Even something on a screen may look okay, but the contrast is not, when it's transferred to the contrast tonal range you've got here on a print, it just doesn't quite work. But the best example I ever came across in this was the first time I visited the Grand Canyon. I was lucky enough, travelling with a friend of mine, it was years ago, and it was a very clear day, and you could see for 60-70 miles easily. And stopping at several points on the way along there and just looking at it, you just stop and look and you just go, whoa, that's big. Photographs just don't do it justice. Now, this is an extreme example, but to make a point of it. Since then, I've experimented with making very, very big pictures. The largest print I've made is 47 foot long. I think if I was going to do a picture of the Grand Canyon that I felt captured some of the emotion that day, I'd need a print at least 15 feet long. Ideally at least 6 foot high, maybe longer even. Not the sort of thing most people are going to put in their home. So that puts it into the category of an image which is, it's a memory. I've took some photos at the time, they're slides. I said this was a long while ago. And it's not one, it won't make a print. I can flick through them on the screen. If I haven't scanned many of these, so most of these still probably reside in Rotary magazines, but I haven't scanned them. But I could flick through them. I could get a feel for that day, but I couldn't get a print that really worked. Even at this size, it wouldn't capture the sheer size of it. Now, that's an extreme example. And I use it just to make the point of it. But to a lesser extent, that is true if I'm standing on the beach on the coast of Suffolk and I'm looking at waves and the North Sea, the mixture of colours, the clouds, everything like that. I've got something there. Can I capture that? Well, I will keep trying. This is part of the reason I mentioned the other day I did a video about revisiting scenes and what works, what doesn't. I put some links in the notes to it. But when it comes down to it, print is the print. I don't care about the screen. Now, I do care about the screen if it's a commercial job and I'm sending the pictures off to a client. But this is the end point. This is it. That is my statement on how I felt that day. Now, I'm sure I took a picture 20 minutes later, which has a different view. That doesn't matter. It's about that. It's about that print. It's about why I like it, why it means something to me. Hopefully you have similar images that work for you as well. If so, think about printing them. It doesn't have to be this big. It is nice to be able to print them this big though. And yes, if anyone asks, that is one of the reasons that I got into testing large printers, because of the paper and ink. Means I can do stuff like this without costing me a fortune. But that's lucky. I consider myself lucky for that. Anyway, if you've got any questions, any thoughts on this, what works, what doesn't work for you, I say the technical stuff is just a journey to get to this point here for that. But that's what matters. But I say thanks again to the person who asked me, picked up a point I made in a video and asked me about it, because I say if you've got any questions, just ask away. Thanks for watching, and I hope that's been of some interest. Thank you.